About 3 or 4 days ago, my friend Kenneth Emmerton gave me a comment on YouTube asking me if I could do a video about the most interesting albums I had. And his father, who often watches the videos that I make with him, suggested that I do some of the most odd album covers that I had. So I decided that since it would be hard to necessarily look over all of the 1,600 vinyl records I apparently have ended up amassing, I decided to do just 10 of these albums that I had offhand. And these are albums that would actually fit into the strange album cover interesting category for the ones I've heard. I haven't heard all of these albums, including this one that I actually only got a few days ago. My boyfriend Scott picked this up not too long ago, and I have a very interesting personal story with this. It's The Crazy World of Arthur Brown on Track Record. This album is from 1968. This is a very unusual psych album. On the side is psychedelic, somewhere between Captain Beefheart and Frank Zappa, from what Scott played me on his record. And the interesting history I had with this was that years ago, my father ordered this CD. He wanted a song by Arthur Brown, and it turns out the song was Sweet Soul Music, and the artist he was thinking of was Arthur Conley, and he later picked it up. But you know, what a surprise this must have been for him. And the album cover is certainly one of the oddest that I have. I'll show you the track label. It isn't that big a deal. Actually, you know, somebody stuck their name tag over the track record label. It's kind of hard to get it off. I may have to work on that. It's not much of a label, actually. And here we have Cher. You might not have expected to see Cher show up in this. This is her album from 1971, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. This is a classic song and a classic album, to be perfectly honest with you. What's interesting about this, though, is that the cover and the way her hair is photographed, it's just a really strange, almost goth-type imagery for such a pop icon. That's the way I suppose a lot of people might think more of Cher in 1971. This album is on the ICAP label, which I don't think I've ever shown anybody before. This particular album cover was something I actually saw on a list of album covers on a site I catalog a lot of my music, and actually all of it, Rate Your Music, of terrible album covers. I don't know if I call it terrible, but it is disconcerting. It's Dolly Parton, Bubbling Over, featuring Travelin' Man. I've listened to this. Actually, it's an excellent early Dolly Parton album. You know, if you like Coat of Many Colors or Jolene, this fits right into that era. But if you look at the album cover, Dolly's been vaporized. And she's watching herself in the background being vaporized. I guess this is intended to be kind of cute and funny, but it's also a little bit disconcerting. This album hasn't been issued on CD as far as I know. This is on RCA Records. I think a lot of you know what the 70s RCA records look like. This I actually found out about on the same list. I bought this album. It's on ABC Dunhill. I've showed you that label before. This is an album produced by Todd Rundgren of another 60s era band. I think there's an inner sleeve I should open up. Just a regular ABC inner sleeve. What got me about this cover is that the guy on the cover looks sort of like a cross between Leo Sayer and the Insane Clown Posse. It's just a really really out there album cover. It's from 1974. And so is this album. Dolly Parton was from 73. Ross. This is a progressive jazz rock kind of group. But what got me about this cover, it's a lot of very unusual imagery, including a pig that appears to have 9, 10 udders. Here's the group on the back. This is on the RSO label. Alan Ross was the head of this band. You all know what the RSO cash cow looks like. The Pretty Things, well, Pretty Things rather, Silk Torpedo. I like the interesting use of World War II era Art Deco design on this 1974 album. There's a gatefold that has a picture of the band inside it. And actually the album folds out so the cover is a little more visible. Let me show you that. That's how the cover is supposed to look. Now this was actually in a book of album covers that my father had when I was very young, and I always liked it. I heard how good the album was, I wanted to get it, and there's also a label for you here. The Swan Song label. I don't think I ever showed you that before. Oh yeah, and there's also an inner sleeve to show you for this album. So, kind of a lyric sheet. This is the Dixie Dregs. They were a group that I actually recently got acquainted with. Jazz rock group who recorded during the 70s and the early 80s. And this is an album of theirs called Dregs of the Earth from 1980. The cover looks like a group of ant dinosaur alien remains. It's really, really strange. Now, you can see it's an 80s era still label. I would say this is probably a somewhat later pressing. Regency Records. I don't know if you can see it in the upper right hand corner. Van Stevenson. This is an AOR album from 1984. And I get it primarily because a lot of people I knew, Dennis Belfield, who used to be with Rufus, and Alan Pascal, you know, a lot of people that I knew very well were involved in making this album and putting it together. Bill Champlin did some singing on it. Somebody has some Braille on the label maker. It's just the 80s RCA label, though. Nothing particularly special about it, but just that cover. It just looks very disproportionate and unusual, but I really actually like that cover design. For a long time, I've seen this on CD, and it's the same group here with a pink background, and it's a really strange and unconventional use of color in that particular case, but I found this 12-inch single. This is actually a 12-inch single I'm showing you, of Senior Coconut's version of Kraftwerk's Trans Europe Express at Dr. Records, the local place I was at, and I was actually talking to the guy who runs the shop about what this would be, and this is actually really good. What this group does is they bring an Afro-Latin, Afro-Mexican flavor to the raw material provided by Kraftwerk. They also do Kraftwerk's song Expo 2000 too. There's the label to it. You can see the little maracas on top. This is from 1999, actually. This is a 12-inch from 1999. This album I got because I thought it was a homemade cut and paste job. It was definitely an indie release. It's from 2011, and it's by Algernon Caldwelder. Parrot Flies. They're apparently a emo group. So far, listening to this, I may have to give this another chance. It's on Hot Green Records. It's a lyric sheet. There's the yellow label. This might be one of the very worst albums I've personally ever heard. I don't listen to a lot of emo rock, nor do I really gravitate toward it at all. But just something about this album was not coming together for me. But I don't think I'll ever see it again, so I'm going to keep it and give it another chance. But here's at least my first collection of most interesting albums and strange album covers. On the next volume I might actually concentrate more on the most interesting albums aspect of this, but I wanted to send a shout out to Kenneth Emmerton, his father. Hope you're all satisfied with this, and gave me a great new idea, so thank you very much for participating and for giving me ideas for new vinyl videos. I wanted to give a shout out to my boyfriend Scott and everybody else I know in the VC. Until then, enjoy your music. Buy for the cover sometimes, but make sure to check out what people are on it, so you have some familiar territory. Or if you have an iPhone or a smartphone, just look it up. Make sure you know what you're getting. But if you think you like what you're getting, get it for the cover sometimes, especially if it's discount. Peace.